So this is all the documentation from our lawsuit with our local county for our daughter. So we have gone through this stuff in preparation for this video. This might be kind of challenging for us. This might be a hard video. There might be moments where we struggle a bit emotionally because you don't forget stuff like this. But we have gone through this just kind of refresh our memories on some things, because there's things obviously that stand out that we'll never forget. And there's other things. I mean, if you've ever been in court, especially with something of this nature, there's so much data and so much information.
Yeah, and it's completely different. I mean, we had no idea going in as to what to expect. It's not like what you see on TV.
Right.
Not for educational court. So that was way different for us as well. And we did a lot of the legwork.
Yeah.
So
I guess we'll start at the beginning for this, huh?
Yeah.
Change of scenery. It's prettier out here. So I do want to preface this with that, like, this case has already been tried.
Right.
It's, we're not flipping through pages and like showing evidence and stuff like that. And we don't want to. We're not gonna, we're not naming names. We're not, anything out there that's not proven is then an allegation, right? Like it's our word versus theirs, that kind of thing. So we're not out to get anybody. We want to share our experiences because we know other people face situations. And in most cases, teachers, educators, especially teachers and educators and therapists, they are there for the students 100%.
Yes.
A lot of times their hands are tied. Funding is always a big issue.
Lack of resources available to them.
Yeah.
Lack of training is one of the biggest things that we came to find out is the biggest issue.
Right. For example, if they do not have 100%.
Well, this is for our county.
Okay, yeah.
So, yeah, I want to make sure every county's going to look different, every state, every school is going to look different. The way that our county worked, and I don't even know if it's the same now. This was, 8 years ago when we went through this? So
2013, yeah.
Okay, so at that time, because I want to make sure, I don't want to give any false information, but at that time, if you had a classroom, a special needs classroom, you had 10 children in that classroom, and 9 of them had an actual autism diagnosis, that classroom was not at 100% an autism classroom. So they didn't have to follow all the same guidelines as a classroom that had 100%. The problem is in our area, a lot of times the district will put these classrooms and these ESE units in lower income areas, and therefore they don't have the resources to get a diagnosis. A lot of times these families, because I know when Abby was getting her diagnosis, it was a struggle for us to get her diagnosed because insurance didn't cover it, and it was so expensive. And we really struggled. I mean, our families helped us to pay to get her the diagnosis. So if you don't have means to that, then that's number one right there. Like, you don't know what to do as a parent.
Right. So then everyone in that classroom, they don't require the teacher to have an autism certification, because not every student in that classroom has an autism diagnosis, even though every child in that classroom might have autism.
Right.
So that was one of the issues that we came up against.
Yeah, and the other one was that a lot of those teachers then are young, brand new teachers. Imagine being a brand new teacher right out of college, because those classes that are also, in inner city areas, they get their loans forgiven a lot of times if they accept a job at these schools.
Yeah, the teachers do.
Right, because it helps them. And so you've got all these things fighting against you, and so that's why we say it's not on the teachers necessarily most of the time. We had a couple of bad teachers, but for the general, purpose of everything, the teachers were amazing. It was just the lack of resources available to them.
Yeah, Abigail was in public school in our county from the age of 3 until the age of 10.
Well, let's
or
see.
9.
No, 2013, she would have been 9.
Okay. Okay, so down to the meat and potatoes of this.
Yeah.
So
You're shaking the table.
I'm sorry, am I shaking you guys? Down to the meat and potatoes of this, we have, we came to a point, we were having issues for many, many months.
Right.
With Abigail's school. And the original telltales were like the fact that, her desk was facing a wall. The other students were not. Her desk was, there were actually a couple students that were. Hers was one of them. She was facing a concrete wall. It's where she did all of her work. And she was really isolated in the classroom, kept separately from the other students. We have photos of that are part of the evidence, that shows where, it's super sad. As a parent, you go in, you see all these students' desks throughout the classroom, and your daughter's facing a concrete block wall.
Yeah.
Abigail had a paraprofessional that was for her, a one-on-one paraprofessional. Priscilla and I fought very hard to get her that para. At the time, she absolutely qualified to have a one-on-one paraprofessional. And
so I'm sorry, I have to cut you off. I'm more like in the details.
Could you try?
So she had a student-focused paraprofessional, not just like a classroom paraprofessional.
Right. Well, I was just saying one-on-one.
Right.
Yeah.
But there is a difference because a lot of students do have a paraprofessional, but it's not necessarily a student-focused.
Well, and the big thing there is funding, is where the money comes from to pay for that. So that's on is that a state level or federal?
So for one-on-one, it's a federal level.
Federal level. So the funding for that person comes from a federal level rather than the school. However, her student-focused para was being used throughout the classroom for lunch duty for other students instead of one-on-one with Abigail, and that's not how it's supposed to be, because it would leave Abigail in many much of the day in situations where she did not have her student-focused one-on-one, and she would just kind of be mixed in with the group. So that's lost time, and as autism parents, as special needs parents, we are facing this ticking clock of, she can only be in school for so many years, and she can only, you can only take in so much information and learn so many new things in so much time, and she needed all that she could get to gain independence and develop and whatnot, and she wasn't getting that because this federally funded student-focused para was working in other, cleaning lunch tables.
Well, and it left her, it wasn't even just a educational aspect, it left her to be in situations that were unsafe for her.
Right.
She was left to her own devices a lot of times, and that is not okay at all. Abby is a very much different child from where she was 8 years ago, 9 years ago. She really required like someone to be on top of her at all times, and mainly for safety reasons at that time.
Another thing that came up was, and newspapers, man, they always like struggle with the real story. One of the articles was about, they said in the article that we wanted, because we brought the news in on this. We wanted everybody to,
Oh yeah.
we wanted to put pressure on the county because they were being really difficult, and we brought them in. And one of the things the newspaper said was that we wanted the school to provide an iPad for Abigail.
Right.
Abby had an iPad. That was early on when she had first started communicating with an iPad, and we were sending it into school, but supposedly, allegedly, other students were using her iPad for, to have fun with.
Like
they were
games.
like taking it from her, and it was being passed around the class, and like this is all the information that we got. And we're like, yeah, that's not okay. Like, she needs to have her communication device. It needs to be used for communication and that kind of thing. And so, we basically told them, like, you then need to provide one for the classroom if that's what something needs to happen there, right? Like, it's not our responsibility to provide an iPad for. Abby's had an iPad for like 12 years. Yeah, more than that, 13 years. So, so that's how that came. So that was another issue that we came up against. It's like we couldn't send her iPad in because we were worried about it getting destroyed. Because it was being passed around as like this classroom iPad from what we were told. Then there were individual situations. So the IEP we felt was not being followed. The IEP is an individual education plan. That's a contract.
Right.
That is an actual signed contract between between the parents and or student, and the student's capable of signing themselves, and the school.
Right.
So,
and just if you are going through these kind of issues, guys, you have to give this school, you know, opportunities, I feel like, to try to, you know, make it right.
Yeah.
And we had 18 IEP meetings from that year, from August through, I think it was January, when we finally filed our due process paperwork.
yeah, December.
So 18 IEP meetings to meet with everybody. And it wasn't just the teachers at this point and like the normal people that you meet with. It was, you know, principals and people from the district, like high up, the people who make these decisions.
Yeah.
So we felt like, you know, this wasn't a matter of, you're not giving my child what I want you to give her, therefore I'm going to do this. Like this was a long drawn out thing. And that was just the IEP part. Like the year before we had issues before, but this is when we started like, okay, what do we do now?
Yeah.
So
There were also safety issues involved.
oh my gosh.
And I'm trying to keep this in a timeline. That's the hardest part, is keeping this together in a timeline for you guys. So trying to cover the stuff that were red flags for us, right?
Right.
So safety issues, like there's photos in that notebook of the back door to her classroom open. This was not long after a school shooting.
Right. And it's an open campus.
Yeah.
So that's super important for you to know.
They were supposed to be in lockdown. Like they were supposed to have all doors locked, all classroom doors locked, and all gates locked. Back door to her classroom was open after I dropped her off from school. The gate outside of that back door was wide open, and then the double gate that leads to the whole campus that points directly at a neighborhood, you know, and this is, it's not, you know, it's in a rough part of town.
Right.
That was wide open. You know, you had a direct shot into the back door of her classroom through there. And, you know, that was definitely concerning. You know, the keys left in the door when they unlocked the door, so that you had not only had keys to the classroom, you had keys to whatever else that teacher had keys to. You know, we saw that. There's photos of that.
And Abigail had, in her IEP, part of it was she had an issue with elopement. And there were 8 children in the classroom. She was not the only child that eloped.
Yeah.
But it was a known thing. Like, it happened on campus multiple times. So this was a known thing. So that's why it was super, you know, like, guys, hello, red flag.
So when you would come into campus, we would walk Abigail to her classroom, and you walk in from the front of campus. There's teachers there. The buses are coming through. Parents are coming through the parking lot to drop off. You walk in between the buildings, right at the front office, and you turn right down the sidewalk. There's a gate right there that leads out to the parking lot. Now that gate is locked.
Yeah.
Right? So you go past that. So once you get in between those two buildings, you're closed in the campus. There ain't nowhere to go. You're on campus. But what we would do, we were working on, you know, elopement with Abigail, so we would look for safe places that she could walk independently, and you know, we could work on that elopement. We were also in therapy at that time. We were working on you know, the command stop, telling her to stop, and she would actually stop and wait for us to say, okay, go ahead now, you know, because that was an important safety thing for us. So just a little, you know, backstory on that. So Priscilla takes her to school, and they make the corner past the building, and they're walking down the sidewalk. Now this is the sidewalk inside of campus, inside the campus. Abigail bolts and takes off. Priscilla's like, well, you know, it's an eloping day, you know. Priscilla doesn't immediately sprint after her, because that's, you know, what we're not supposed to do, because that's chasing her, right? It's a game. And Abigail turns right. The only way to go to the right is out that gate to the parking lot. Then Priscilla realizes that gate wasn't locked, and she chases after Abby. Abby runs through the drop-off line and into the parking lot, and the next thing after that is the road.
Yeah.
So that was a situation with that gate. We brought that to the teacher's attention.
To the principal.
The principal's attention, that gate was unlocked. What really upset me was that we went back another day.
Well, because they said it was unlocked because they were going to have a fire drill that day.
Right.
I'm like, guys, think about it. If you have a fire and you have all of your gates locked like they're supposed to be, why would you unlock them for a drill?
Yeah.
You need to have like everything the way it's going to be for when you're having an actual fire.
Right.
You don't like set them up so that they can be successful for the drill. And
but then we took
day
pictures other days, and the gate was like not even, chain wasn't even on it. So this was like a reoccurring thing with us was the safety issues at the school in general.
Yeah.
And then it came down to individual safety for Abigail. We received there were numerous emails back and forth about this situation. There was meetings about this situation. The district was brought in on this situation. But a teacher, and this is what we were told by the teacher. Abigail came out. By the
actual teacher.
Yeah, Abigail came out and she was covered in what looked like colored mud down the front and back of her pants. I mean, just covered, like you'd taken dirt, like clay, mixed it with water, and just like wiped it all down your clothes. And the classroom teacher told us that this is the situation that happened. Abigail was playing with Play-Doh. It was edible homemade Play-Doh, but she's playing with Play-Doh, and Abby is just putting chunks of it in her mouth, being allowed to do that. And the teacher kept saying to the para, she's putting it in her mouth, she's putting it in her mouth, she's putting it in her mouth multiple times. And the para did nothing. This is what the teacher is telling us.
Right.
Telling you.
And this is not Abigail's one-on-one para. This is a para for the classroom.
Her one-on-one was not in the classroom.
She was
out working.
Yeah.
So, and then Abigail had a spoon because they had like spoon utensils for the Play-Doh they're playing with it, and she would gag herself at the time. She had a stim where she would, intentionally gag herself. She was sticking the spoon in her mouth to gag herself, the plastic spoon. And again, the teacher said that she said something over and over to the paraprofessional, to the classroom para, and it was ignored. Emails back and forth. We actually have printed off whole Facebook messages back and forth with this teacher for the court case. And that story later changed to the teacher allowed this to occur so that she could prove that she needed more help in the classroom. So she let our daughter be the canary for the classroom to gag herself and, spit out chewed up Play-Doh. And we have, that's, so that's kind of some of the stuff we were dealing with that teacher. For example, we have, there was a case in which her classroom, or her student focus para fell on top of her, and it was an accident. And accidents totally happen, but we wanted to know why we didn't get an incident report on this.
Because there was injury. Yeah.
Abigail was limping from it, and then I think the para got hurt, right, because she was trying to protect Abby. Right. And it should have been an incident report, and we were questioning that because we had not received incident reports on several occasions at this school. Abigail came home covered in fire ant bites one time. Oh. We did not receive an incident report for that. So this occurred multiple times, and anyway, the student focused para told us about it because we had a personal professional relationship with her. We had known her for years, and she communicated directly with us, and she told us what had happened, but the county denied it happening. Yeah. Flat out denied, as far as in the paperwork. So, so that kind of leads up. Was there anything else specifically? It was.
There were
so much.
Falsified documents of like doing things with Abigail that they.
Well, and that came up later during due process.
Right.
Yeah.
But because we're going through all these documents, and our lawyer was shocked that they had so many documents. She's like, I didn't expect them to have all this evidence.
Well, that was our fault. We put all of our cards on the table early.
Right.
And said, this is what we're having problems with. This is the issue with this. This is the issue with this. When we went to due process, and they went back through, and in that timeline, our lawyer looked, like Priscilla said, looked at them just like, they have so much documentation, and it didn't actually benefit them because the judge looked over it.
I watched a lot of Law and Order SVU, and I literally did not sleep probably 4 months.
Yeah.
I went through every form that they gave our lawyer, and they had falsified data for like weekends, holidays.
Field trips that Priscilla was on, they documented bathroom trips, because at the time we were working on toileting. So they would document all the bathroom and graph it out.
Yeah.
And they had documented bathroom trips that they took Abigail to, but Priscilla was there on a field trip with Abby. Like Priscilla was, and they have classroom data on a field trip day, or on a day that Abby was sick or tardy. We have a whole stack of like every day of from this time to this time, and who was tardy when. And there are days when Abigail was tardy getting to school. She would get there at like 9:05, and they have recorded that they took her at 8:55 to use the bathroom.
Yeah. Or they would sign her in as being tardy, but it's neither one of our signatures.
Right.
So there were things like that. And we literally went through everything. There was also some issues because if you're in a public school setting, for our area anyway, you receive services in school. So speech, occupational therapy, and then physical therapy at the time. Well, the physical therapist was not coming for his allotted amount of time, but writing that he was. And the teachers, like I said, that's what I'm saying. Like, these teachers were telling us, like, you might want to know that the therapist is saying he's coming for 30 minutes and he's not. And we're like, what? So they were actually timing him and those kinds of things. So whoever pays for that out of the district money he's not even doing it. He would not come, or would only come for like 10 minutes, and he was supposed to be there for 30 minutes. So there were things like that happening as well. It was just a lot. Abigail was allowed to sit in little boys' laps, which was not appropriate. I said, here my son is in school. If he was sitting in a young lady's lap, that wouldn't be allowed. Why is it okay for this to happen? Taking her to the bathroom, because she was the only girl in the classroom. So taking her to the bathroom and not like shutting the door, letting the boys line up.
They had group bathroom trips.
Yeah.
Like they would sit on the floor in the bathroom, along the wall. Or stand up in the bathroom and wait for their turn to use the bathroom. So she's in there with, 4 other kids. And this is all stuff, again, this is all stuff that we have been told. Like we weren't,
right. We weren't there, but
we weren't there for this.
Either paraprofessionals were telling us or other teachers were letting us know.
And in there, some of the things is just inexcusable. In their defense, a lot of times it was the resources that they've been given. Mm-hmm. There wasn't always a classroom para in that classroom. There wasn't always, if Abigail's student focus 1-on-1 was out, they had to replace her with somebody else, and that would pull from the classroom. So it was, there was lots of variables there, and it wasn't like the teachers were they weren't out to harm or neglect Abigail, but their actions did ultimately, not all of them, but some of them and some of their actions ultimately would be considered neglectful, in my opinion.
Right.
Of neglecting a child and a child's needs and furthering her education. We brought into the situation, a big focus of ours was the IEP, because a lot of this stuff is hard to prove. It's hard to say, as far as court cases, it's always a dance. It's this dance you have to play. So the only real legal document we have here is the IEP. So we had to push hard for the IEP. Mm-hmm. We had to push really hard on that side of things. We were able to show that there was a competency issues throughout, but our big focus was IEP and lack of following the IEP. So we had to show that they were not following it. Therefore, Abigail, we were showing de minimis progress.
Right.
Was a key phrase there. Basically, she was not improving because of that. And there's another video on that whole topic of Abigail not being capable of learning. But that's the direction that they were working towards.
Right. 100%.
So we go into trial. We go into due process.
Well,
what's it called? We had to come inside because for some reason Priscilla dressed for fall, and it's hot. You look cute though. So next up was mediation. And in our mediation, that was basically everybody comes together as a group, and you try to work together as a team. And that's kind of the feeling that they give you. That's their goal. They act like they're on your side. This is our experience. So mediation was just that, you're trying to mediate between the two sides. You have someone who oversees the mediation.
Right.
And there's someone that's supposed to be neutral in it. It was us, our lawyer, their lawyers.
5 lawyers.
5 lawyers, yeah. It was, and it was kind of weird. They did not bring in lawyers that were...
They didn't bring in the educational. So we have county lawyers here for educational, like the people who know all about education. They didn't bring them in.
Yeah, these people did like land and property stuff.
And divorce.
And divorce, which is weird. So that's who we were dealing with. And they did very much so try to like, hey, as a fellow mother of a child with a disability, I understand
gross.
where you're coming from and blah, blah, blah. Her child was, I don't know. I don't remember what her diagnosis was, dyslexia or something like that. ADD. And, I understand where you're coming from. And then, and so we're, I don't know, I guess we're trusting people, but we're very like, they really do want what's best for Abigail.
Right.
Until we go to court.
Right.
And then when we actually go to court, it was very, very different. When we brought up the safety concerns, they tried to draw a parallel between Abigail at home and safety concerns there. And that's when we really, really felt betrayed. We had discussed that with, we had of course told her teachers of the incident in which the one time in which Abigail's safety was put into jeopardy when she, ran from Priscilla in our neighborhood and waded into a retention pond because she wanted to get in the water. The one time that occurred, and the line of questioning is very much like you see it on television. They give you questions that you have no way of answering other than with an affirmation, with saying yes. They structure their sentences in a way that makes it sound like what they're saying is correct and accurate.
And it's fast fire?
Quick fire questioning.
Yeah.
And I was questioned on that one, and I feel like I was intentionally targeted because I wanted to do because you were the one present, but they questioned me because they knew that I would want to protect you and my daughter, and it was, I felt like a cornered animal. I really did.
And they had the male lawyer questioning you and the female lawyers questioning me.
Yeah.
To make it, it was like a whole, and I know it's a whole thing.
Yeah.
That part I have learned from Law and Order SVU.
But we felt like we were on trial ourselves.
It was awful.
Yeah. It was hands down the worst experience of our lives.
Yes.
And that's one thing I would definitely caution. Like, we're not saying don't. If you feel like, this is the only route that you have to get your child what you need, or what your child needs, we're not saying don't, but you gotta be prepared.
Yeah.
Like, you have to realize that this is gonna be the worst thing you've ever experienced.
Asa and I, we don't fight a lot, but it was so trying on us as a family.
We've been through some crap, Priscilla and I have, and this, I believe, was the worst thing that we've been through. Because it didn't pit us against each other necessarily, but... No,
but it's such high stress.
Yeah.
And then you have regular life stuff going on. That's when we owned our motorcycle and ATV repair shop.
Yeah.
Luckily, we have really amazing parents. They all were there for us. But I remember it being really hard on Isaiah even. Yeah. Because he would see us so stressed out. And we would go to court, and it lasted over a year. And so we were totally consumed with all of this stuff. And it's hard to watch your child struggle because she's in limbo at this time. Like, she's having to go to school. That was one of my biggest issues that we tried to fight and fight. I'm like, she's going to school with these people that we're on trial with right now. They're talking about it. You know they are, because she would come home with bite marks all over her arm, super high stress environment. We never talked about it in front of her at home. We did that on purpose. But we knew that it was being talked about at school.
Yeah.
And so finally...
Well, and Priscilla had experienced the teachers talking about students and their living conditions, talking about the cleanliness of the students, the weight of the students, you know, in front of students. Like this,
Right.
She had witnessed that herself when she was working in the classroom.
Right, because
you know,
I was
talking
there
about
every
personal
day.
gossip, things. Like, yeah, Priscilla was always there. She was always helping out. Like these teachers, you know, and these, you know, we were pretty close with them. Like,
Yeah.
Priscilla spent a lot of time in the class helping out, and we were loved and adored, you know.
And I know that might be weird for some people because that's not a normal, like I've been like that with Isaiah's teachers as well, but you have to remember, when you're dealing with a nonverbal child,
Yeah.
you have to be able to trust the people that you're taking your child to. So that's why we always had really close relationships with everybody. Even
Right.
now we do.
Well, and a lot of that, and Priscilla knew the challenges that they were up against at this school.
Right.
And she wanted to help. You know, she's like, I can help. You know, because she had spoken personally with the teacher and knew, you know, was told what they were lacking in the classroom and the personnel they were lacking and all this. So Priscilla, you know, threw her hat in the ring to assist. And that's why she was there so much. And that's how, you know, unfortunately, that's how we ended up with all this information.
But I think it got too comfortable.
Yeah.
People got complacent. And so it definitely backfired.
Yeah. And ultimately, the person that hurt the most was Abby.
Yeah.
So anyway, into trial, and the judge heard everything. She actually scolded me because I raised my voice at this lawyer and told him, I said, are you just going to keep asking me questions, or do you want to know the real story? Because he said things along the lines of, but she just left her in there until, talking about in the retention pond, she just left her in there until you got there, huh? Which is technically true, because I was right down the road, and Priscilla was worried that if she didn't move fast enough, if she went to go get Abigail would swim further away into deeper water.
Right. Like seconds.
Yeah, and so I pull up, you know, as Priscilla's contemplating this, like I was coming home from work. So this is like, you know, but in the structure of that sentence, yes, that is correct. That's when I kind of lost it, because he was trying to make Priscilla look like she was neglectful and just letting Abigail swim in a retention pond like any parent would ever do that. So it was very tactful that, you know, they definitely went after us, and then they changed it into, or, you know, they tried to change things into that Abigail was too developmentally delayed and too disabled to actually learn, and that's why we had not seen progress.
Right. So their big push was for us to allow them to perform an IQ test on Abigail. And we declined that offer because they had their own school
Tester.
psychologist,
Yeah.
right? Psychologist, yeah. So he came in as part of the trial, and, you know, we were asking questions. And one of the main questions we had was, do you have a means to test a child who is nonverbal? Because we had no problem with it if they have the right tools available, and they did not. And he said that they did not.
Yeah.
So that's why we said we can get her tested outside of the school district, but they didn't want that.
They wouldn't accept that. So that
Right.
was another one of the gotcha moments. So one of the gotcha moments for us was, you know, when they provided records and they were proven to be fabricated because Abigail wasn't even at school those days,
Right.
or a field trip or whatever. And that one, when the guy came in and the psychologist came in and sat down and said, you know, and our lawyer asked him, do you have the means to test someone that's nonverbal? And he says, well, no, we don't have that in this county. Then the judge said to the guy, she said, then what are you doing here? So
Yeah.
that was pretty much like nip that one. So those were kind of those moments where they were out of their league, the lawyers were, because it's not something that they had done before, you know, the education part of things. The reason why this was such a big deal as far as the legal side of things is you don't win these kinds of cases.
No one has ever won against this county.
Right. It
And
just
we
doesn't
knew that
happen.
going in.
Yeah. But Priscilla talked about, I remember reading through there where it says all the things that, all the claims that we make, and they respond to all those claims. And it says parents have requested access to the McKay Scholarship multiple times and been denied. And they admitted to that because of the pending trial, they were keeping her in place. And that's important because, like Priscilla said, the self-injurious behavior, the obvious stress that Abigail was under, the fact that she was in a classroom with the teachers that we were accusing of neglect.
Right.
It was just disgusting.
Like they would come in the morning to trial and then go back to the classroom in the afternoon.
Yeah. So, and if you're not aware, so we have the McKay Scholarship here. What that means is after 1 year of elementary or of public school, you qualify for the McKay Scholarship. The McKay Scholarship bases how much money you are allotted off of a score. That score is determined by health needs, developmental, all these different factors that they score you on. Abigail scores at the highest. So she gets the most, but what they determine that number off of, the dollar amount, is how much it costs to educate her in a public school setting. So it's almost like a voucher system, right? She's not,
right.
It's not a handout, it's not a freebie, this is what it costs to educate her in public school, so we're gonna take that money and move it somewhere else. So we had requested her McKay numerous occasions during all this that we could go ahead and pull her out and move her somewhere else, and they actually denied that.
Yeah.
Which is wild because anybody can request McKay.
Right.
And like to get not denied for that reason.
Anybody that has an IEP can have their McKay.
Yeah.
Or I think even a 504 plan, you can use a McKay.
Yeah, yeah.
And you don't even have to use it to go to private school. You can use it to go to another public school if you wanted to.
Right.
But they denied it. And that's what we were trying to do, was get it just to move her to another public school. We weren't even trying to get her to private at that point.
And the craziness of it is like because a psych coach that Abigail had been, psych coach is like over all the ESE department, which is the Exceptional Student Education Department. The psych coach that had been over, she was a teacher, and then she was a psych coach, and then she was a psych coach at another school, and we had coincidentally kind of followed her around. She's very good, and we wanted to be in a program that she was a part of. I mean, it makes sense, right? Like, wouldn't you do that in any situation? You would.
Right.
So she had gone to this private school, to Abby's current school, and that's what they were, they're like, oh, they just want to follow this lady around.
Right.
Well, no, but also yes, because she's awesome. So why wouldn't we want to? But
we hadn't talked to her in years.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't a thing. We weren't like,
If she had been gone from public school for years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing too, guys, is we brought in, and we were so thankful to have a whole team of people, of witnesses basically, that talked about the therapies that we got for Abigail. It's not like we dropped her off at school in August and said, here, do what you do as a teacher, and we'll see you back in June.
And then they didn't do it, and then we were mad.
Right.
Yeah, like that's not what happened.
I mean, her psychiatrist went to court for us.
Yeah.
Like, that's huge. She had 2 ABA therapists that went to court. All of these other people.
Respite.
Caregivers that we had, friends and family, like all these people were there to support. And an old teacher that Abigail had, who doesn't work for the county anymore, went there. All of these people went to stand up and say, and I'm not trying to toot our own horn, but we are very involved. We don't expect everybody to fix our child. That's not what we were looking for. But we do have to have, we do expect our child to be taken care of.
Yeah.
And not neglected. And one of the big things we learned through this whole process is you cannot say, I want the best, because they don't have to give you the best.
They're not required to give you the best for your
Correct.
child. They're required to provide your child with what is adequate for them to learn. And, asking for the best is never going to happen. So don't do that. Yeah, Priscilla was no trespassed. That happened too.
Yeah.
They're not dumb. they know that we would have collected more evidence and they had stuff to hide. So, I mean, obviously, because they were, you know, forging documents and stuff like that. So
they wouldn't let her therapist come in because we had also offered to we were going to pay for her ABA therapist to go into the classroom, kind of see what was going on, to give tips and tricks on how can we help.
Yeah, to work on those areas that they were struggling with.
Right. They would not allow that because they had never had a therapist in the classroom.
And that was before. That was like at the beginning of any kind of issues, but before, you know, this had turned into any of this. Before any of that, it was just
right.
Very,
and
very
her
beginning.
therapist had been in other classrooms in the county, so that wasn't like a thing. So
yeah, it got ugly, and it was, again, the hardest thing we've ever gone through. The end result of it is that we won our case. So I was in the shop, I remember, when I got the phone call.
I was at the pool with Abigail. It was during the summer.
Yep. I was at the motorcycle shop, and I just kind of crouched down, like where I was, like squatted down and started crying because, you know, when our lawyer called us and said that we won.
She was in tears.
Yep. And so then I'm like, okay, so...
What does that mean?
So what does that mean? And what it meant really was nothing. Okay, so if we had lost, obviously they would have been worse. Like, they wouldn't have to provide anything for Abigail. Like, nothing would have come of it. We won, but really that meant nothing. Then we still, you know, the judge does, it does, but the judge doesn't decide, you know, what is going to happen.
Yeah, it's not like normal court.
Yeah,
guys.
like, okay, you owe so and so this much, and or you don't have to pay for this, and we do have to pay for this. Like, that's not what happens.
Right.
We still had to go back and forth with these terrible people, these lawyers. They just were terrible people. Okay, I know they're doing their job, but they were just not good people. So we had to go back and forth with these lawyers and, you know, come to an agreement still. I'm like, what was even the point of all that? Like, we went through over a year just so we could go back and forth with them over this. So it was ridiculous. But what ended up happening was...
remember, we were the week of school starting and we still had no idea where she was going to be going.
Yeah.
So we had to have people... We actually created a whole Facebook page.
Yeah.
That we had people calling the mayor, the superintendent of the school, like... All the news medias were, that's when we were a huge part of Surfers for Autism. Mm-hmm. All of those people were contacting, and we finally got an answer, 2 days before school started, of what the final outcome was going to be.
Yeah, we were using numbers. You know, we're like, you know, guys, please, here's a script for you. Here's, and the news picked up on that as well, that we had created a whole Facebook page because we had won, but we didn't know where our daughter was going to go to school. They didn't, nothing. Yeah. They had done nothing.
Part of the deal was she wasn't allowed to go to the local county schools.
Right.
That was part of written in the documents. Yeah. So we're like, okay.
For 5 years. Yeah. She wasn't allowed back.
So we're like,
in our county
we don't want
schools.
Her to, but where can she go?
Right. So the end all of that, what ended up happening was Abigail, of course, can access her McKay scholarship. So she gets her McKay. The remaining balance, they figure that out over X amount of time, and and they tried. This was funny. So they tried to give less, right? Because they're going to pay the difference, is what they're going to pay for 5 years. Was it 5 or 4?
5.
5 years for her to go to another school. So they're going to cover the difference. They figured out how much that amount was going to be, but they tried to give us less because they said Abigail will progress, therefore need less assistance in the classroom. Like, but y'all just said that she's incapable of learning. How is she going to progress?
Right.
But when it comes to money, so that's how that went. But eventually, we came down to, okay, this is what it's going to cost for 5 years, and that is and they tried to give it to us as a lump sum.
Yes, and we did not want that.
First of all, it gets taxed if it goes to us a lot, because that's it's a good chunk of change. Second of all, then they're no longer responsible for that. It kind of takes them out of the equation. I'm like, no, this is what y'all did, so y'all...
And we didn't want the money. That's not what we were looking for.
We didn't want any money. We wanted to put Abigail in a you know, if they would have worked out a deal directly with a school or whatever, that'd been fine. But they can't actually do that. So there has to be money involved. So we did work out a way for there to be money to transfer from one location to another without them technically paying a school, because that's not what they're supposed to do. So so that's how it worked out. They paid the difference for 5 years worth of education, and the crazy thing is, Abigail has progressed so much since then.
So when Abby first started at her current school, she required a one-on-one ABA therapist all day long. She was in clinic all day from 9 to 3. She did that for the first year. The second year, she moved to half day of doing that, and then half day in the classroom, but still with a one-on-one. After that, she was in the classroom all day with a one-on-one. Now she's to the point she's in the classroom all day, no one-on-one.
Yeah. And she has push-in ABA therapy as needed.
Right.
We determine year by year, you know, what ABA therapy is needed where, and she's progressed so much to the point where McKay covers most of her education. You know, so it's like, told you, you know, like the progress that we saw in 1 year at this school
was more than
surpassed
5 years.
5 years at the you know, in her previous schooling.
Yeah.
And more importantly, like that's not a gotcha moment right there.
No.
Because we're talking about public school. They have limited funding, they have limited resources, they have limited training, you know, and that's the place they should be getting the most. Like, our kids would be so much better off later on in life, so much less reliance on the system if the system took care of them early on. And that's a topic for a whole nother video that just frustrates me. But so that's where we are, and we're forever here. Like, we're forever in a position where Abigail can, well, forever till she's 22. Yeah. She can attend school till she's 22.
With the McKay.
With the McKay. Yeah, the McKay is available till she's 22 years old.
Yeah.
So that's where we are. That's our story. That's our, you know, please keep in mind all this stuff is our experiences. This is not what other people are going to experience or what you may have experienced, or even the point of view of the teachers and, you know, therapists and educators and stuff that were involved in this situation. This is just our point of view and our experience.
Right.
And everything that, you know, everything that we went through. Again, I would caution, if you're not ready for it, it ain't for you, because we weren't ready for it, but fortunately we were able to keep it together. And, you know, at the you know,
don't do that now.
sorry.
You got all the way through. You did good.
I did. It was worth it.
Yep.
It was so worth it.
I'm so proud of her.
So
we will fight for that little girl. She's not a little girl anymore.
You know, we
lady.
haven't had to fight in a lot of years.
Yeah.
And it seems like we spent the first 8 years of her life just fighting, you know, just constantly fighting against stuff. I know things are a little different now in most areas. If you're in a more rural area, you're probably very familiar with what we're talking about.
Yeah.
You know, to get those services your child needs, but in most areas, things are a lot different now. You know, we're talking about stuff from, you know, from a decade or more ago when resources just weren't available. But yeah, let us know if you can relate in any way to this, to, you know, to the fight we've had to do for our kids, and I think that's what makes us so tough. You know, being parents of children with disabilities. We can put up with some crap because we've seen some. So
yeah.
But that's our story. Everybody wanted to know it. If you have any questions for us, if we can help you in any way, please feel free to send us a message. Facebook is a great place to do that, and you know, we can at least give our input and advice. It's not professional input and advice, but we do have experience in this area. So thank you guys for watching.
Thank you.
Did you have anything else?
I don't think so.
Okay. Love you guys. Bye.
Bye.